This podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. Our friends over at SeatGeek are giving us a promo code of TBA Wrestling. That is TBA Wrestling for $20 off your first purchase. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Gunners Rust Podcast, where we are positively Arsenal, and that we are. And today, here on the main feed, iTunes, Spotify, give us a 5-star review, and on the Patreon ad-free, we'll be talking about transfers. So even though the last couple of weeks, or the last week, I've done the look backs to all the way back to August, and 12 months or 10 months have passed, and to see where we were thinking then, and then see where we were thinking at the end, or what actually happened. And it's always fun to see it because you're so far off the base, or you're so far on the base, so sometimes it's quite alarming. Or you were thinking one thing and it's way better than you imagined, but now we're here, you haven't realized that it's actually a really good moment. Or you kind of get lost in the mix where you think, oh, okay, yeah, the season was kind of what I expected, and then you actually listen back and you go, oh no, it really wasn't what I was expecting. It's just as time moved, our goalposts moved, and we became more maybe excited for the possibility of winning the league, or think it's more possible than we did at the start. But that was last week, and the end of this summer and after the World Cup, I will be doing the exact same thing with Joe, where we kind of predict how we'll be podcasting at the end of May the following year, and what's acceptable in our head, or what's acceptable to the public, or what we want to happen, what we think will happen, everything. We'll do all of that stuff. But as of right now, I'm actually going to do a little transfer one. And this one will actually be only 6-7 weeks. So this will be the start of the season. So we're looking at, it is right now, as of recording, 7th of June. So this will be coming out on the 8th, tomorrow morning. So we are 2 months away from the start of the season, maybe a bit more, and the end of the transfer window. So let's say it's 8 weeks. We'll be going back over this at the start of the Premier League or the end of the transfer window, and I've got it all written down in front of me, and we'll see how far off. Because even in the 8 weeks, I think it's so interesting to write this down or say it out loud on a podcast, because sometimes you can say, oh yeah, we're going to buy Vinicius, and for whatever reason it was in our head. You remember this time last year, we were all pretty much certain that Rodrigo was going to join Arsenal, and if it wasn't, he was going to join Liverpool, and he just did another year at Madrid. And now no one even talks about him leaving Madrid, even though they're trying to buy wingers and Galacticos. And we could talk a bit about Madrid generally in this podcast, because some chaos going on there. But it's always fun to see this, because I think we get kind of drawn in, or maybe taken for a walk a little bit by the transfer rumours and things like social media. And we kind of, the club have never mentioned Krupi. The club have never mentioned Julian Alvarez or Rodgers or any of these things. Hand of Arsenal is kind of the club. They've mentioned Monga from Leicester. That feels like something that could happen, but he's never even mentioned on Hand of Arsenal that we're definitely going to buy Alvarez or Rodgers or anything else. So because of that, we get led astray. And at the end of the year, and for example, we've all got in our head, for example, this is a quick one, we're going to go through this in deep form, but we all expect Jesus, Martinelli, Nwaneri, Ben White, Kepa, Norgard probably all to get sold, right? But it's not going to happen like that. You know that we're not selling all those players. We're notoriously bad at selling and moving players on. Hence why in the last 4 or 5 years our net spend has been worse than it's ever been. When we're a team that for 15 years running paid for a new stadium, and we're in net positive every single year and never missed out in Champions League and won 3 FA Cups, which is one that, honestly, and Wenger says it, the Invincibles wasn't his biggest achievement. It was paying for that stadium while being in a net positive and competing in Europe and winning the FA Cup and things like that. So impossible to do because of all that good work and the stadium being paid off, and then obviously us doing very well in Europe and start to become second in the league and all these kind of things. You get so much money that PSR wise allows us to do what we did last year, but we spent, I think it was 280 million on players, and we only brought in, I think it was around 60 million in profit, like as in from players, which if you think about it, it's like 180 to 200 million area net spend, which is a good chunk. When you think of Liverpool spending close to half a billion last year, but their net spend was only about 210, 220 million, which is not far off of ours because they sold a lot better. And they managed to get players like, was it Kwanzaa for 40 million? Things like that. They did some really sharp bits of business. And you just think, how have they done that then? And we can't seem to find that type of player going for that type of money in our squad. And we've watched the likes of Tomiyasu and Zinchenko go on a free and release people from contracts and just go, do you know what? We'll just pay you out. When you look at Ozil or Aubameyang, we're not making money from even assets. And under Edu, that got particularly bad. I think Berta, as ruthless and as good as he is at buying, I think this year we might actually see the ruthlessness of his selling, because realistically there's going to probably be more loans in and out than we expect, because I think we all play Football Manager, don't we? And again, like I said, I'm going to go through all this in long form, but on Football Manager, what would we do right now after winning that league? We'd look at our squad and we'd go, probably most of us would go Kepa, Norgard, Martinelli, Trossard, just because of Trossard's age, Jesus. Some would probably, in FIFA, probably Madueke or someone like that, Nelson, Vieira, all these guys, they'd all be gone. And we'd get in 150 million, 160 million odd. And then we'd go and buy Rodgers, Krupi, like the players that I mentioned, Alvarez and Endrick and God knows who. And we go buy all these players. Livramento, that's another one that keeps getting talked about. And we go do that. And in real life, it's never like that. Sometimes last year was the closest I've seen to that. But even getting rid of the players, it became harder. We had to do loans that turned into releases, and we had loans that are now coming back to us, and we have to get them sold. But certain assets aren't seen the same. When you look at like Reece Nelson, Jesus, Ben White, Martinelli even, I think you could actually argue that some of these players should be being sold. When you look at Kwanzaa, or you look at Van Hecke right now being sold. Spurs had a second bid, around 78 million, rejected from Brighton for a player who I don't think is as good as Mosquera, who was 13 million last year and younger. So it just shows you that, one, the Premier League tax, but also just prices are bonkers right now. That the market is chaos. But you sometimes look at certain players. You look at Anthony Gordon. He's going for 80 million to Barcelona, and you think Bayern Munich would probably have Martinelli for like 30 million, and you're thinking, wait a second. One's, Mane's younger, right? Scored more goals. Won a Premier League. Brazilian. You got to add that. You know what I mean? Like, playing the Premier League for a very long time. It's defensive duties, very good. And you kind of think to yourself, but why is he not 80 million? Do you know? Why is he always going to leave for 35 million? Why is Jesus bought for 45 million? You're going to sell him for less. Because they haven't depreciated. Like, for example, Martinelli is in the prime of his kind of career, really, at 24, going on 25. This is when you should be able to cash in on a player like that if you think he's maybe a surplus to requirements at Arsenal. But instead, when we kind of see the rumours and things like that, it's always around, 28 million, 31 million. And when you think of our biggest ever sales being around the 40 million mark, 38 million, you can kind of see why. Because I think it's a mixture of a few things. Maybe not selling very well, also not selling at peak moments. We don't often do very many. In the modern era, we used to sell our captain every single year to pay off that stadium that I was talking about earlier, to be in that net positive. But we never sold well. Still sold Henry for the same amount as Darren Bent the same year. We still sold Cesc Fabregas for a cut price to Barcelona. We deal with things because players usually force their ways out, and we kind of just play along and go, okay, fair. And other teams go, we can't pay that. And we go, okay, well, they want out, so we're going to have to accept it. Too nice almost, not ruthless enough. And I think in the last 3-4, especially under Arteta, there hasn't been very many unpopular sales. And unpopular sales are usually the things that bring in you the most money. Because when you look at someone like a Villa, who do have PSR issues, but, sometimes people go, well, net-wise, they only spent 40 million last year and they made Champions League. It's like, well, because they have to sell Rodgers, for example, maybe. Or they had to sell Duran, or they might have to sell Watkins, or they had to sell Diaby, or whoever it is. And the same when you look at other teams like Everton and Palace, even Elise, Eze, Mateta, they all got to go. Wharton eventually, and that's why their books look so good. Whereas if you're a team that are competing, you can't really sell your best players to buy best players because you're weakening yourself. You have to every year. Arsenal are in a position where we have to be stronger than last year. So if you're going to cash in on Martinelli, you have to be sure you're bringing in a player that is better for the team. And I'm not the best person for all this because as an Arsenal fan, I've always been this way. I love our players. I love all of them. I think they can all do well. I think there's a place for everyone. Maybe there's a couple this year for the first time where maybe like Vieira, I don't think needs to ever play for us again. I think we can sell him. I think Jesus, as much as I love the player, I think it's time. I know it's time. We've got too many people ahead of him that are better. And I wouldn't want to see him playing. So I get that. But then there's players like Martinelli that I look at and I go, for example, he's in my PC for card collection and I can't bring myself to get rid of the cards, even though I'm not much of a Martinelli collector. I can't even part with some vaguely cheap cards, let alone telling the player, yeah, you're not good enough anymore. And there's been plenty of times where I've been very frustrated with him, particularly in the last couple of years, where I thought, we've moved beyond him. He's not good enough. But then there's a part of me that's like, but I love that guy. I love the fact he's been there the whole time. I love the fact him and Saka kind of pulled us out, and he's a legend of Arsenal, in my opinion. But he can also be a legend and leave and go and have a great time in Italy or go back to Brazil or maybe even another Premier League team. Or I honestly think he will win more trophies beyond Arsenal than he has already. He's only won an FA Cup, Community Shield and a Premier League. But I think in his future, if he stayed at Arsenal, maybe he would win just as many. But I actually think he's going to have 6 or 7 trophies in his career. And I don't mean little trophies. I think proper, real big boy trophies. So I don't think he's at the end. So he is peaking. But he hasn't had his best season ever. So therefore, when you think of someone like Martinelli, and I remember having this thought a couple of years ago when we did the podcast, and we were talking about who's our biggest assets. And we kind of talked about Martinelli, Saliba, Gabriel, and people like that maybe one of them could be sold and it'd be unpopular, but we could get 100 million for any of those players. And then all of a sudden we're set in a position where I could 100% see a summer where Martinelli leaves on a loan with an option to buy for 35 million, which would be brutal because I truly believe he's one of the original assets, one of the gems that if we ever did want a bit of money, it was always like, break glass in case of emergency. I think Martinelli, Saliba, Gabriel, Saka, to a lesser extent, but Waneri, Dowman, Lewis Skelly, there's certain assets that you just think you're only going to make profit on these guys. Gabriel and Saliba were bought for a combined 55 million. Martinelli was bought for 6 million. Saka free. Miles Lewis Skelly free. Waneri free. Whereas when you look at players like Eze, he's only depreciating because of his age and because we bought him for 55 million. Same with Gyökeres, same with Havertz. We're never going to get 75 million. But he is a weird one. Havertz feels like he feels like one that we could cash in on. And if ever he's going to get the most amount of money, it's probably this year. Do I want to sell him? No. But similarly to Martinelli, sometimes you have to go, well, maybe it hasn't gone beyond him at all. I don't think the project is better than him. I think he is one of the best forwards in the world. I think you'll see that in the World Cup. But I don't think he'll ever, as he gets older, I don't think he'll ever be midway through his contract. This is the year if you're ever going to make money on that. And I think there is a tiny chance you can make money, even though you bought him for 70 million. I think there's a chance you can make money on Havertz at this exact moment. But I don't think we will. And then people like Rice, you're never going to sell him. Again, if you sell him this year or next year, I think you might get 120 million for PSG or Real Madrid or one of these teams that will do that. So you could make money on him. But realistically, when you spent that money, you knew the investment wasn't in to make money down the line. It was to win trophies. It was to make the team better. So there's kind of a mix. And I just think this year we will have to sell one of those break glass in case of emergencies. But I'm more likely to feel like it's Martinelli than it's Saliba or Gabriel. There's a little report that Saliba, there's talk that someone could launch a 120, 130 million pound bid, probably Madrid, but I don't think we should, because just because we won the league doesn't mean we should now weaken ourselves. I think this is the year of ever is to go, do you know what? Ben White, let's sell him. Let's get in Livramento. Is that an upgrade? If it's not an upgrade, if it's not a guaranteed upgrade, I think we just don't do it. Do you know what I mean? I think we're gone to those days. We've done that a lot with, especially with defenders and goalies. We move sideways by losing, spending 40 million and selling for 20 million. You think net wise, we just went up. We just spent another 20 million net, but we haven't improved. We've just gone sideways. I don't want to do that. I think when you look at the squad this year, including loan players, I'm going to use the only loan players I'm going to use, because I think Carl Hein left the club this week, is Nelson and Vieira. Including those two, I think we're going to have to sell 6 players total. That's maybe 5. I'm going to say 5. I think we're going to have to sell 5 players, including the 2 loans. So 3 players from that current squad. And when you think about it, we talked about all year was usually you've got like your 11, your 5 really good subs, and then there's usually about a pack of like 5 or 6 that are either complete misfits, youth team, or players that have kind of like gone through the youth system, still hanging about. What Eddie Nketiah was for us. Wasn't really good enough for the first team, but wasn't young enough to be a youth player. He's kind of there, and you think, yeah, we should probably get rid of this guy, Whereas the problem with this current squad is the version of Eddie Nketiah is Gabriel Jesus, a 5-time Premier League winner. The equivalent of Cedric is Ben White. This is a Premier League winner and an unbelievable right back, and could have been at the World Cup right now if he wasn't for injury. That depth is so good that when I say we're going to have to sell 3 players that aren't the 2 loan players, that means 3 players that played a part this year, because there's not one player that you could say, they didn't really say anything. They didn't really say their piece this year. And, you're naturally going to look at Kepa, Norgard, maybe Moreno as players that didn't necessarily play a lot, and therefore you think maybe they're kind of surplus to requirements. But Moreno obviously isn't. But Kepa still played in a cup final and a quarter final and got us that far in those. He was a big part of, he's very close friends with a lot of the players. Norgard played so many games at centre-back and centre-mid in other competitions, including the Champions League, including the FA Cup, Carabao Cup, some Premier League minutes, but not a lot, and then even had a huge influence on the team in a locker room role. So they all played a part. So it means 3 people of note are going to have to leave. And maybe they'll be on the lesser end, but I've got a feeling one of them is going to be someone that we'll all go, do you know what? that hurts. And it could be Martinelli, it could be someone else. But there's going to be one that you think, did we get everything out of them? And that's the problem, is that's our mentality, and it always has been, is did we get everything? Did we completely drain the juice from the fruit, then sell the skins? That's essentially what we've done. And, when we go, we have this really good player, but we only got 20 million for him. It's like, because you had his best years. At some point, you've got to sell someone who's 23, 24, and he's in his peak, but you just know squad-wise, he's replaceable. Or he maybe proved it this year, for example, where not being available and the team still functioned fine. And you think, do you know what, he's an asset, but we're fine without him. And also with that money, we can go get someone that maybe isn't as good, but because we dealt fine without him, maybe we add someone to the depth, and then we're absolutely fine. So there's multiple ways of looking at it. I've reached out to Joe to find out who he thinks are his kind of sell and buys. I've got a couple. I've got so far. Who else have I got coming in? I've got Joe. I'll do these at the end, just to give people time. I've messaged a few people. Let's check another one. Ooh. Sometimes you realize you haven't said anything in a group chat for a while. There you go. So we'll get to everyone else's thoughts, and we'll get to mine first. So as far as sales, what I've got written down in front of me, we've got the 2 loan players, and I've written down where I think they're going to go as well, because I think that adds an element of funniness is the only word I can really say, because I think it's just funnier when you predict so on the button, like this price, this team, and then they go completely somewhere else, or they don't leave, and it's just like, where was my head at 8 weeks ago? Why did I really think, for example, Vieira is going to go to Hamburg for 16 million, because that is the first thing on my list. Because if I start with the two loan players, I think Vieira will be sold. I think he had a decent season with Hamburg. I think 16 million is the price we're going to sell him for. If I remember correctly, we brought him in for around 28 million in pounds. I think it was 32 million euros. And if you remember, it was one of those purchases. I don't remember which year it was, but we really needed some signings. We needed some marquee signings. And there was talk about a few players, and we were really waiting for like some kind of Ornstein bomber or a here we go. And all of a sudden, Arsenal just put up, we've bought a player, and it was called Vieira, and we were like, who? Where? What? And it was for a decent price, and we thought, is this, and people were saying, oh, that's the regen of Bruno Fernandes and all this, and you're like, oh, is it? Oh, I hope he's good. And it kind of came out of left field. It never really got going. I think he's actually a very good final passer of the ball. I think his biggest asset is his final delivery is actually very good. I think as a player, we've come so far, even in I don't think he's played for us for 2 years. When you think of that red card he got in that random Premier League game where his foot was high by accident, and he set up, if you remember the 3-1 against Man United with the Gabriel offside goal, the third goal against Jesus, it was him with the really nice delivery to Jesus to go one-on-one. He's a really good final pass, final assist kind of player, but the rest of his game, we've just moved so far beyond as far as like strength on the ball and concentration and not making mistakes and lots of those kind of things. And he's done all right over in Germany, so I think we should be, and I think they're very keen on taking him on from what I've heard. I think 16 million is a good price. Again, complete depreciating asset. When you buy a 20-year-old, you do not expect to sell him for half price a couple of years later, especially after loans. The point of the loans is that teams see how good he is. Other teams come in, but the team that had him go, yeah, we'll pay full price. We need this guy. And I know there's not much money in a lot of the other leagues, unless you're buying Anthony Gordon, for example. They do want a lot of loans, and ideally you'd want Vieira to go to Everton for 40 million, for example, because Everton go, do you know what? Like what teams like Brentford have done with Hutchinson and teams like that, almost pay over the odds because it's an Arsenal player. They assume, well, this is going to improve us, surely. So first on my list is Pablo Vieira to Hamburg, 16 million. The next loan player that's coming back is Reiss Nelson. I've got him going to Coventry for 11 million, which is it's pure profit. We do remember that, even though he's a tail ender. He is now probably 25, I want to say. So it feels odd to say that almost, but I see him going to another promoted side. I think I like the idea. My word, he turns 27 this year. Unbelievable. Been at Arsenal his entire career. He had the loan at Hoffenheim that went quite well, 7 goals in 23. He went to Feyenoord online, he scored 2 in 21. Then he went to Fulham, he scored 1 in 11. Then last year went to Brentford and he played 10 games, got no goals. As for England, played all the way up to under 21s level, very good form, but never played for the main 11 of the England team. But his youth career was 2008 to 2017. Then since 2017, so 9 years as an Arsenal player. It's just 4 goals in 50 appearances. Obviously, the really memorable one against Bournemouth. He'll always have that. But, this isn't a player we're going to be able to get a lot of money for, but it is pure profit, and that is really important. I think last year in my head I had someone could buy for 20 million. It's now already down to 11. I think that was the worst of his loan deals. He's had some big injuries as well in there, like the hamstring tear. A lot of these things aren't helpful. The Arsenal in me is telling me we're going to end up letting him go for a free to a place like Coventry or a Fulham or somewhere like that. I hope we can get a fee. I wonder if it's another loan, but I really think loans aren't going to help us at this point, because with our quite expensive season last year, and then this one's going to be another one, because I think we have to really grab the bull this year, figuratively, because when you've got kind of we've sunk our teeth in, we need to keep driving. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it'd be silly for us to go, all right, well, let's let's not buy anyone this year because we did spend a lot last year. Let's sell a few players. Let's weaken the squad a little bit. But I think we'll still go over the line. And then you don't. And you think, oh, what were we doing? There was so much manager carousels in the Premier League. We had an opportunity to go back to back. And I think we got to be really strong because in 3 years, 4 years' time, when Arteta's not there anymore, or, Saka's 29, 30, and we're playing a lot of Dowmans and that, and we haven't really been challenging for a couple of years, we're going to remember these moments. So it'd be silly while the sun is out, make hay. It does feel that way. So I've got 11 million to go with my other loan player Vieira for 16. The first one I've got, and I really think people maybe are playing a bit too much Football Manager. I think I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, Vieira, Nelson gone, Norgard, Kepa gone." And then they're throwing in like Jesus, Calafiori, and Martinelli, and they're naming all these players. You think that's a lot of outlay because if you sell Kepa, and everyone's like, "Oh, just promote Setford," there's probably a reason why Setford's not a number 1 or a number 2. So if you sell Kepa, do you really want to? We're only going to get 5 million for him or whatever it is. Do you really want to go looking for a 25, 30 million pound backup keeper at this point? Because that would be a nightmare. And you saw what we did for a couple of years. We just started loaning goalies in just to kind of fill a spot. I think if you've got Kepa, he's bedded in. He's a good keeper. As much as people want to mess about with it, he's a very good backup keeper. I think you just keep him there. Keep him there. Square him away. He does his job. He's happy. Let's just carry on. And I do, if you remember, I think the reason he actually came to Arsenal was because he had just had twins, and I don't think he wanted to move. So if we do let him go, realistically places for him to go are like back to Bournemouth or Brentford or Fulham, and I don't really see any of those teams needing a keeper. And if you're going to be a backup keeper, would you not want it to be for the champions or the team that could go back to back or make it to a Champions League final or even have a cup run? So for me, I'm going to keep Kepa. But the other one in there that people keep throwing around is Norgard, and I would happily keep him. I think something's changed because that Lewis Skelly being added to that quartet of players that could play in the 6/8 or at least a double pivot, being Norgard, Zubimendi and Rice. We added Lewis Skelly. I think he might see it as like, well, I'm fairly sure Odegaard can drop a little bit deeper and Moreno could drop a bit deeper. Do we even need that player with the emergence of Lewis Skelly at the end of the year being a midfielder now and someone who I think we are going to build that midfield around a little bit? You don't necessarily need that guy, especially if you're trying to get some money off the books maybe. I don't know if we are. If we're not, I would just keep him there. He could play all the cup games, similar to Kepa, but outfield. And if you have a real bad injury crisis, he's someone who's going to bind that team together, and he can also be trusted. Even though he was one of the few players in the squad that I think Arteta really didn't trust with many minutes. So I've actually got Norgard going to Genk for 5 million. And again, this is 3 players gone out of our squad for 32 million I've got so far. And I think that's being generous. So sometimes I think, if you have a valuable card that's 50 quid, but it's valuable to you and it's only decreasing, and someone goes, I'll give you a fiver for it. There's sometimes more worth in just keeping the £50 card than ever selling it, if that makes sense, because the price is too low. So Norgard and Kepa in that kind of thing for me is like, I'd rather keep, it's like the devil you know and the devil you don't know, but I don't think they're the devil in any way. I think they're really good and I really good professionals, and I really want to keep them. I just think if you're going to get rid of Kepa and you're going to get rid of Norgard for 6 million combined, and then we go spend 25 million on a backup keeper and 20 million on a fourth choice 6, I just think it's bad business. I think it's just something we don't need to do when you could just keep them in situ, because if we keep Norgard another year, he's going to get it sold for 3 to 5 million next year. It's not really a problem. If we sell Kepa next year, he's going to go 3 for 5 million, or he ends up having a really good cup run, ends up playing a little bit in the league because maybe Raya has a couple games out, touchwood, doesn't happen, and we actually do get 20 million from Brentford, and because he is a world-class keeper, he's the most expensive keeper of all time at the end of the day. So I don't know how I feel about it. I'm going to put it down. I don't necessarily like it, but Norgard for 5 million. The next one is the other kind of elephant in the room as far as sales, and that is Jesus. I cannot put my finger on where he's going to go. I've written down these 3 things. I've put Brazil, Everton, Italy. I've written down 2 countries and then a random Premier League team. I just think, and I've had this feeling for a while, if Everton have invested in Barry and Beto and they've spent close to the amount that we spent for Jesus, I think if they were to sell Beto, they could probably sell him to Fiorentina for 20 million. I think you take that 20 million, you add another 15 on it, I think a lot more, and for 35 million, I think they get Jesus. Yeah, the wages are high. Everton can pay some good wages. They obviously took on Grealish's wage, and it looks like he's going to be made permanent. Drewsbury Hall, and Jai, I'm sure these guys are on good wages. But I think Jesus instantly makes the Everton team a top 12 team into a top 7. He's world class. The difference that they've had this year is that Barry and Beto are not very good at football. Generally, they're not awful, but they're not great. Jesus is great, and I think he would really elevate them. I could also see him at any of the Italian giants like Jesus, Juventus, or even the Milans, and I could see him go back to Brazil. And they have the money to spend on about 35 million. I think that's probably the ceiling for Brazil and Italy to pay. UK tax, Everton might have to pay 40, 45, but I think that would be a good price. This is a 5-time Premier League winner. He's still in his prime. He's 28, I believe. This is not, you're going to get 3-4 years out of him if you invest in him now. Yeah, you're not going to make money at the end of it, but they're going to make you instantly better for any of those kind of teams like Everton. So I've got him down for 35 million. I genuinely believe he should be more. My brain is telling me he's going to end up going for less, which is horrific. But I got a feeling I'm going to hedge my bets and say 35. The next one I've got written down is Martinelli. And like I said, I'm having a real back and forth. Love the guy, don't want him gone. But you can't win titles by kind of having passengers. And I'm not saying he's a passenger. I think he scored one of the most important goals of the season. Unbelievable in the Champions League. And these are the other reasons why I think we should get a pretty penny for him. Because he's scoring in top level football. Top level. He's an all-round great winger. But I just think maybe we need a new lick of paint on that side. So I've got Martinelli down to AC Milan, and this is a price, 38 million. Again, like Jesus, I think that should be closer to 60, 70 million, genuinely, because Arsenal, for whatever reason, have this weird thing of the general feeling or narrative around the price of some of these players is like Martinelli, oh no, he's trash, 20 million. But then Neto will go for 60 million. He's as good, if not better, than Neto. Garnacho will go for more. Martinelli's more proven. And then people say, oh, Bradley Barcola should be, that's a £100 million signing. Well, if he's £100 million signing, I'm not saying he's Barcola, but he's also done a lot. We forget, like, he's not, the Sunderland winger that's played 1 year in the Premier League. This is a guy who's been in the Premier League for 7 years. He was the top goal scoring Brazilian until Thiago took over this year. He's a very good football player, and if he is going to leave, I'd love to see him go to Saudi. I'd love to see Saudi go 80 million. Go on. I could see Munich doing something really kind of crazy with him and replacing Elise with him, and everyone going, that's odd, because Bayern Munich do that. They like to take some off cuts sometimes, I think, and just go, we'll have a go on that. Why not? And they turn him into little monsters because he is one of those players. His fitness is unbelievable. His defensive rate is good. His closing down's good. He's very quick. He's got a good finish on him. It's just sometimes he gets his head down. He goes to the byline a bit too much, and you think, a bit frustrating. But in a different league, different pressures, I think he really could thrive. So I've got 38 million. I really think it should be more. I'm hoping it will be if he does indeed go. And then I've got my wild card one is Calafiori, 70 million to Real Madrid. And I know there's a little bit of talk at the minute about this one. They've just brought in Konate, Jose Mourinho and Denzel Dumfries. They're trying to rebuild a little bit. There's talk of Perez. They're doing these, I didn't even know about this, but voting to be the new president. And they're kind of essentially promising things in a very American president type way that they can't deliver. And the one that's up against him has said, we're bringing in Haaland. Haaland's camp said that's not true, so now they're suing them. And then he's brought in those three and said that's just a start. I'm bringing the Galactico the side of Ronaldo or Kaká on Tuesday for 120 million. Everyone now can't figure it out. Everyone said it must be Haaland, it must be this or that. He said it's not Haaland, it's not from the Premier League. It's a midfielder who can also play up top. Now he's confused everyone because the main conversation is it's Elise. What does that even mean? Play in the middle or up top. This is a winger. And Elise, is he in Galactico? I don't think so. I don't think he's that level. But I think he's very good. I think he improves them instantly. But what happens to Rodrigo or Vinicius or Mbappe? And they've already got a bit of a grouping there that could become quite interesting. But one of the players that have been talked about is he wants to bring in another defender to really reshape him. And Calafiori is a guy. This is the unpopular wildcard one that I was mentioning. It'd be sad to see any of the players I mentioned go, especially Martinelli. But this one would hurt the most because I think we haven't seen the best of him yet and we know how good he is. But with his injury record, and he is so Real Madrid coded as a player, I think I could get my head around this one. I don't want it. I really don't want to. But if we could get 70 plus million and make a profit on him, I think that'd be... Do you know what I mean? I think that would be one of those... And if you think about it, by the way, I've got Martinelli and Calafiori breaking our transfer sales. And to do that twice in one season would be very impressive because it would mean you're doing unpopular ones that make the most sense and you're replacing them with as good quality as possible. So I've got Calafiori for 70. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm just going to check my phone for any other suggestions in my WhatsApp. And where is it? Joe. So Joe, his sale, and this is an interesting one. It's one we need to talk about. Is Trossard. I don't know. I don't fully understand his deal. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't know if his contract is up. Because if you remember, James McNicholas from Gunnerblog and The Athletic, he did an kind of an exclusive, didn't he, about, I want to say 18 months ago, 12 months ago, where we didn't extend his contract. We just boosted his money. And everyone said it was ridiculous and like what a weird thing to do. And we were saying it's only fair because the money he took on was not the money we were making at that time. And now he deserves it because he's he's first 11 in the Champions League final. He's still an unbelievable football player and he's still got more time in him. I've seen a little report that he actually was looking for an extension. For me, I think you bring in a left winger who is Martinelli's replacement. And I think you keep Trossard for another year and then you look to the future. You either bring in another winger who could potentially fill that role behind the player that is now Martinelli's replacement and then you move Trossard on, or you buy someone else next year. Whether it is a Krupi or someone, you bring in someone then. And I actually think you keep Trossard. I think too much change. I know everyone wants us to make more attacking signings and defensive signings. If you make 3 or 4 attacking signings and you sell 3 or 4 attackers, you'll lose a lot of connectivity and a lot of kind of build-up play and kind of the chemistry will be gone. And it's tough to get it very quick and you could cost yourself a lot of things before you get it. So you need to keep some of those binding agents together like Havertz, Gyökeres, Saka, Madueke. A lot of this is left side. If you think about it, if you lose Martinelli, Trossard and Calafiori, that's the left back, the left wingers, the whole left wingers crew. There is also a thing to be said that this time last year we generally thought Madueke was brought in to be the new left winger. And with Daumann's emergence, I wonder if the idea is Madueke could be the backup to the left winger and you bring in one left winger and you actually do sell Trossard and Martinelli. So I'm very interested by that. I don't really know what to think of it, but Joe's gone with Trossard. If he's under contract still, I'm fairly sure he's out of contract and he has to kind of either resign or move on. So I don't think there's any money in it. I need to double check that. But he does feel like he's in that list of what people are saying. But recency bias, he was so good at the end of the season, but he also went missing for about 4 or 5 months this season. So it is hard to tell. I'm just going to look up Trossard contract status. Should Google tell me? He is under contract until June 2027, so he's got another year. He signed an improved deal, was secured him a pay rise, but did not extend the duration of stay. he makes 1.82 million annually, running until June 2027. Apparently, Arsenal are open to offers in the region of 20 to 25 as they assess their attacking options. The thing is, the teams that are interested are Borussia Dortmund, Atletico, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Besiktas, Brentford, Galatasaray. I mean, and there's reports that he actually turned down the extension. Was that for me that would change things, because I think if Trossard is saying he wants to leave, and maybe personally with everything going on in his life, he wants to get away and gets to Turkey or another country or whatever, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but you then keep Martinelli. What I don't want to see is Calafiori, Martinelli, and Trossard. I think that's too many on that left side. So for me, one of the two. I don't think it'd be both. But Joe's gone with Trossard. I've reached out to a few people, and I think Kyle has got back to me. He said Martinelli. He's just not the player for us at the Prem, the way everyone plays a low block. Love him, but I think it's time to cash in. See, that's where my head was at, closer to him. Joe was at the Trossard. But if you look, it's both for the left wingers. They're the kind of break glass. It feels like it's Trossard and Martinelli, but I think it can't be both. So I'm just writing that down, because then we got an idea of everyone's. As far as buying, hand of Arsenal. By the way, I just want to say, without the Calafiori sale, with the rest of them, Martinelli, Jesus, Nelson, Norgard and Vieira, I've got 105 million made there. And that feels like there's not in a million years are we going to make 105 million in a transfer window. If you add the Calafiori one as well, it's 175. And if we were to get 25 million for Trossard and not Martinelli, but we still sell Calafiori, it would still be 160 million. And I think that is unbelievable to lose Calafiori, Trossard, Jesus, Nelson, Norgard and Vieira and be £160 million in and available to sale, to buy. The first one on the buy list, I've got Monga. Monga is the Leicester youngster that, if you remember, couldn't play a game because he had a betting sponsor on the front when he was in the Premier League. Let me have a look. I've put a certain price down, but I don't know if he's 16. Bought in 2009. Unbelievable. He's born in Coventry. Jeremy Monga. It's a cool name, I'd say. I'm just putting in price. Talk. They reckon 10 million to 15 million. I had 20 million. I'm going to put that down as 15 because that's right in the middle. And it's reported. 15 million for a 16-year-old seems a lot. But if you think about it, if we sold Daumann, you'd expect double that. But again, this is a signing that is not for now. It's for, 5 years' time when Lewis Skelly is 24 and when Harry is 23 and Daumann is 21 and Monga's 21 and Salmon is 21 and Setford is 23. This is who this is for. And by the way, Mosquera's 25. That's the team. That's the future. And I think 15 million on him, because when you look at a transfer window, it's never just 3 big signings. It's usually like there's a youth player here, there's 15 million, won't see him for a few years, he might even go back on loan, and there is talk he's going to go back on loan straight away to Leicester. Maybe, I'll tell you what would be really interesting, if we bring him in, if he's born in Coventry, I wonder if you could loan him to to Coventry, and see how he gets on in the Premier League, and just watch it from afar and go, he's our player. If he's unbelievable, you bring him back and go, we've got a player. If he's not ready, and that's fine, and you kind of put him in Hale End and let him kind of get ready over the next couple of years. But I do like the signing. I think getting in those kind of young top level players is really smart, but it is an interesting one because it's not something that changes us right now, and it's instantly 15 million off of that 160 million, let's say, that we made. So 15 million Monga from Leicester. The next one on there is my one, and actually Kyle, he had this down as his signing, which is Rodgers from Aston Villa. Notoriously hard to buy from when you look at people trying to buy Watkins, i.e. us, Martinez, i.e. Man United. There's been a lot of sales of theirs that have been extremely tough to get over the line, and they become very awkward. They push you to the last second and sometimes pull out, sometimes they allow it, and it means you don't have a retort. Sometimes you end up losing something you've chased all summer, and then you're in a pickle. I just saw an England video that was all the Arsenal players turning up, and the last image is Ezra and him hugging, and it did feel like they put that in there on purpose. And you hear these stories of I was watching the Istanbul doc of Gerrard talking to Lampard and Terry at the World Cup, and him saying, "Yeah, I want to join Chelsea then," and kind of almost agreeing it before going back and then kind of sticking it out with Liverpool, and then obviously everything changes with the Champions League win. But that England camp is really important because especially when our players are notoriously online, there's no way that Saka, Rice, Madueke and Eza aren't just at Rodgers going, "We're getting it done. What's happening?" So it does feel like one that will get done. I think the price that is being talked about and the price that I think we'll get him for is around 70 million. And again, this is the perfect example of Martinelli will get less than half of that. And I'm not saying he's the player that Rodgers is, they're different players. But it just, I don't know, there's something that I cannot get my head around valuations. But I think Rodgers is unbelievable. I think he's actually a really important signing. I think against PSG he would have been unbelievable. I think his running power is just second to none. Him running off of the back of Havertz, who's up front from that 10 role, is going to be so dangerous, so good. He's got such a good finish on him. He's a good player. And I think he instantly improves us because in a minute I'm going to do a kind of like for like. The other player that I actually think he isn't going to be the only attacking option that is one you can't really place. And I think this is going to see a lot about with Arsenal is we know Trossard and Martinelli left wingers. We know Saka and Madueke are right wingers. We know Dalman is a midfielder or a right winger, and when Aries is a right winger or a midfielder. Odegaard is a 10. Eza is a 10. We know Gyökeres is a 9. Havertz, Moreno, these players, they're the confusing ones. Are they 10s? Are they 8s? Are they 9s? We do not know. I think we're going to bring in a lot of players who we might all kind of, on the surface, look at and go, have we got 10 players in the same position? But I think that's on purpose. I think that's also to help the squad depth. And I think the next signing is actually going to get over the line. I think it's Alvarez. I think Julian Alvarez is going to join Arsenal for 75 million. Two massive signings. I think these are going to be the two big ones. And again, is Alvarez a 9? Is he a 10? We don't know. Could he play off the wings? Do not know. He's done all of it. He was unbelievable at City. He's really found his way at Atletico. Watching him in that game against us, and he's just such a quality player. And I think he's someone who instantly improves us. I think he's world class. And I don't know what else to say, really. I think he's just a player that you could play sat in there behind Havertz. You could put him on number 9. He could replace Jesus. Like, if you imagine squad depth, we have Havertz and Gyökeres. We're using Jesus. We'll add Alvarez. But the thing with Alvarez is he's got a bit more about him than Jesus in the sense that he could go anywhere. He's also set pieces are unbelievable. He's got a lot of things going for him. Work rate is unbelievable. He's such a stylish player. Reminds me a little bit of Ljungberg from the Invincibles. So yeah, I really like that signing because I think for a lot of us, I think we were thinking it's going to be Rodgers or Alvarez. I actually think it's going to be both, but you're not going to see a number 9, typical number 9 signing. I don't think you're actually going to see a left winger typical signing. I think this is actually what it's going to be, and I wonder if Rodgers is the Trossard replacement and Martinelli keeps the width as the backup. So that is what I think. The next one is Hincapié. This has to be done. It's an obligation to buy 55 to 60 million. The reported figure, I think it might be 60 million euros or 55 million pounds. 100%, he's worth every penny. I think he's proved it. He's the reason why we're looking at Calafiori and going, yeah, I can see that. We don't want it, but we can see it because he's been that good. And again, he's another player who's very young who, when Dalman and all those guys hit legal drinking age in America, he will be 24, 25 and could be that Gabriel type player us if we can keep him because he's already at the level. He's at the level that he has to be at to win Champions Leagues, and he's there now. That's how good he is. So I think he's worth every penny. It's going to happen. Excited for it to happen. My wild card one, I'm looking at Real Madrid and I'm thinking a lot of movement. Calafiori potentially, Dumfries, Konate, Mourinho's there. There's talk that Elise is going to come in. There's Vinicius, Endrick coming back off of loan, Rodrigo, there's Mbappe, there's Ceballos, there's struggling here, Arda Güler, Chouameni, Camavinga. These players are all kind of there something's gonna have to give. And I wonder if because of this could be a lightweight, this could be a like for like, could be a swap, could be swap plus money for Calafiori. I've got a little sneaky feeling we're gonna add Camavinga to our midfield. This is, again, it's a wild card. This could be one that in 8 weeks everyone goes, what? Because I think you're going, what now? So it's not one that needs time to be confused by. I'm going with Camavinga. The thing I'm looking at here is I'm almost certain we're going to lose Calafiori potentially. I say certain. It feels like that, and I've not replaced the left back because Hincapié, who's not an actual left back, we're going to have to buy a left back. I wonder if it's Brown, who's a really good left back, but again, young. My personal feeling is, again, if you're going to, it's like if you noticed here, I've not got Ben White being sold. I just think you sell Ben White, you buy Livramento, you end up with a net of 30, 40 million. Are we improved? Don't know. I think they're as good as each other. I don't want to lose Calafiori, bring in a young player and go, do you know what? Yeah, we made 30 million, but we've regressed in that position. I don't want to regress in any position. I'll just say Joe's one is Krupi. It is one that I haven't talked about. And he would fill a lot of the kind of areas that Rodgers or Alvarez. I don't think you could get Rodgers, Alvarez and Krupi. I think it'd be ridiculous. And we don't need that many players. But the big talking moments are Rodgers, Alvarez, Krupi. Monga looks like it's going to happen. Hincapié, Camavinga. There is Mbeumo, the young PSG captain for the under-21s. He's being talked about. I think he's a defender. I wonder if he could be someone we look at. Again, another one for the future. I don't necessarily want to sell players, especially where you're looking at what I've got down, including my wildcards. We're losing 4 of the current squad that actually played a lot of minutes this year. And I'm replacing it with Monga, who's not going to play this year, Rodgers, Alvarez, Hincapié, and Camavinga. Hincapié already played, so I'm losing 4 from the squad. I'm adding 3 essentially to the current squad, but Dauman is another year on. Nwaneri's back off loan, so I wonder if they're going to fill some of these spots. Because for me, I would love to keep Nwaneri. There's talk that we could probably get 40 million for him. I do understand that, because even if you added that to the Calafiori, Martinelli, and you did if you did Vieira, Norgard, Nelson, Jesus, Martinelli, Calafiori, and Nwaneri, and let's say Ben White, you look at another 60 million on top, so that's 240 million you would have. And if you bought Monga, Rodgers, Alvarez, and Camavinga, that's 260 million. If you remove Nwaneri from another one, that's 85 million pound profit net. Sorry, not profit, net. If you add Nwaneri, it's only 45, but that would leave you an ability to actually go and buy another big player. Maybe it is a defender and a midfielder. But again, I think too much change could disrupt the whole thing. I've got loans. I've got Setford, Salmon, and Nwaneri actually out on loan this coming summer. Setford, I think, needs one. I'm also not opposed to Kepo leaving and Setford becoming the number 2. But I don't know enough about goalkeepers and how good he actually is, but I really like Setford. Salmon, 16. He looked real good, but he does need a loan. He needs to play a couple of years because he's not getting near that current squad until he's at least 18, 20. A couple of years, strengthen up. Smart loans as well, it needs to be. And the other one's Nwaneri. I'd rather keep him, but I could see him going out on loan, maybe to a Premier League team. It's a real tough one because he had a nightmare of a loan. You almost want to just keep him in-house, and even if he plays 3 games, he plays 3 games. Because I'd rather he play 3 games for us and train with us than go away and play 10 games for a team that are struggling and he's not getting on the ball. So, like he did this year. So, that's who I would do. See if any more have come in. Let's have a look. So I know that was a bit confusing when I was saying all the numbers, but that's what I've got. I've got no one else going through. I'll add them to the list when they do come through off mic, and then in 8 weeks I'll bring up what everyone said all in this one piece of paper. The other one I've got is World Cups winners. I'm going to say, my crazy outside guess is Portugal to win the World Cup. And I think Holland will be the biggest letdown. Joe's actually got England to win the World Cup. We'll see. But I've written this all in the piece of paper so we can go through it in 8 weeks. Other kind of talking points are some people mentioning Endrick, some people mentioning Mbappe, Rodrigo, Vinicius. There's a lot of massive players available. But again, to do those types of things, you've got to kind of remove a lot of big players that I think right now is not our moment to kind of go, let's throw all our cash at Mbappe and try and change our fortunes. Fortunes have already been changed. It's just about kind of plugging along. And like I said, I don't want to regress in any position. If we lose Calafiori, we need to bring in a better, if not as good, defender. So my theory is maybe don't sell the players that we don't know how to replace. Because I do not want to come next year. Hincapié gets injured first day of the season. Lewis Skelly plays the whole season at left back, even though we had him in midfield and we didn't buy a midfielder because he was going to be there. Now we don't have one at left back. And then you do a whole season and you struggle a bit and everyone's like, oh, if only they bought a left back. It's like, oh, if only we just didn't sell ours. You know, so things like that are important. I think Vieira, Nelson, Jesus are guaranteed gone, in my opinion. Norgard and Martinelli, I don't know. Calafiori's definitely a wild card. Trossard is definitely dependent on Martinelli. As far as coming in, Monga looks like it's done. Rogers, Alvarez, and Hincapié has to be done. And my wild card was Camavinga. Joe said Creepy, Carl said Rogers. And loans, Setford, Salmon, Winery. And overall, depending on averages of how much we bring in and how much we sell out, I've got us at about 80 to 100 million in net spend, which actually isn't too bad. I think if at the end of this summer we look like we've improved and our net spend was 80 million, I think that's really, really good business. So I'm hoping for the best. This piece of paper is going to sit here in the studio, just to my right. That is going to stay right there and not be touched for 8 weeks. And we're going to look at that on an episode here on Gunners R Us. And we're all going to sit here and laugh because we're going to go, what was I thinking about Portugal winning the World Cup? Or were we seriously thinking of buying Krupi? Because he's at PSG now. And we've got Kvaratskhelia. So who knows? But time will tell. We'll be back on Wednesday for Gunners R Us podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, also on Patreon ad free for this episode and extra episodes. And I just kind of waffle at the minute because we're right between the World Cup and the end of the season. I've just done some transfer talk, so the Patreon's a little bit me just talking about football. So if you like that, go give that click on the link below this. It's about £6 a month. It also gets you in a raffle to win a graded Arsenal card, so it's well worth it. We don't have many Patreons trying to build it, and it means you're more likely to win a graded Arsenal card. So go click that link and enjoy the content. But we'll be back on Wednesday. Bye bye.